Good evening. I am Capital Leaguer Jamaray Porter, and today I'll be reading for you How the Grinch Stole Christmas. Every who down like Who Willie, but the Grinch who lived just north of Who Willie did not. The Grinch baited Christmas the whole Christmas season. Now, please don't ask why. No one quite knows the reason. It could be his head wasn't screwed on just right. It could be perhaps that his shoes were just too tight. But I think that the most likely reason of all may have been that his heart was 2 sizes too small. But whatever the reason, his heart or his shoes, he stood there on Christmas Eve, hating the Who's, staring down from his cave with a sour, grinchy frown at the warm lighted windows below in their town. For he knew every who down in Whoville, and there hanging with stocking, he snarled with a sneer, "Tomorrow's Christmas is practically here." Then he growled, with his Grinch fingers nervously drumming, "I must find some way to stop Christmas from coming." For tomorrow he knew all the Who girls and boys who wake bright and early, they'd rush for their toys. And then, oh the noise, 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 noise. That's one thing he hated, the noise, noise, noise. And then Who's, young and old, would sit down to a feast, and they'd feast, and they'd feast, feast, and feast. They'll feast on Who pudding and rare Who roast beast, which was something the Grinch could not stand in the feast. And then they'd do something like least of all, every Who down in Whoville, the tall and the small, who stand close together with Christmas bells ringing. They'd stand hand in hand, and the Who's would start singing. They'd sing, and they'd sing, and they'd sing, sing, sing. And the more the Grinch thought of the Who Christmas sing, the more the Grinch thought, I must stop the whole thing. And then he got an idea, an awful idea. The Grinch got a wonderful, awful idea. "I just know what to do," the Grinch laughed in his throat. And he made a quick Santa Claus hat and coat. And he chuckled and cluckled, and a great Grinchy trick. With his coat and his hat, I look just like Saint Nick. All I need is a reindeer. The Grinch looked around, but since reindeers are scared, there will be no one to be found. Did that not stop the old Grinch? No, the Grinch simply said. If I cannot find a reindeer, I'll make one instead. So he called his dog Max, then took him some red thread. Then he tied a big horn to the top of his head. Then he slithered and slunk, with a smile most unpleasant, around the whole room, and he took every present: pop guns, bicycles, roller skates, and drums, checkerboards, tricycles, popcorns, and plums. And he stuffed them in bags. Then the Grinch very nimbly stuffed all them in bags, one by one, up the chimney. Then he slunk to the icebox. He took the Who's feast. He took the Who pudding. He took the roast beast. He cleaned out the icebox as quick as a flash, while that Grinch even took out their last of the Who hash. Then he stuffed all the food up the chimney with glee. And now, grinned the Grinch, I will stuff up the tree. And the Grinch grabbed the tree and started to shove. Then he heard a small sound like the coo of a dove. When he turned around fast, he said a small Who, little Cindy, little Who was not more than 2. The Grinch had been caught by his tiny Who daughter, who'd got out the bed for a cup of cold water. She stared at the Grinch and said, "Santa Claus, why? Why are you taking our Christmas tree? Why?" Then he did the same thing to the other Who's houses, leaving crumbs much too small for the other Who mouses. It was 1/4 past dawn, all the Who's still abed, all the Who's still a-sneezed, and he packed up his sled. Packed it up, packed it up, packed it up, packed it up. He packed it up with presents, packed it up with ribbons and wrappings, the tags, the tinsels, the trimmings, and the trappings. 3,000 feet up the side of Crumpit, he rode with his load to the tip-top to dump it. Pooh-pooh the hoo-hoos, he was the Grinchliest humming. They're finding out now that no Christmas is coming. That annoys Grinch the Grinch, that I simply must hear. So he paused, and the Grinch put his hand to his ear. And he did hear a sound rising over the snow. It started in low, then it started to grow. By the sound wasn't sad, why this sound was merry. It couldn't be so, but it was merry very. He stared down at Whoville, the Grinch popped his eyes, then he shook what he saw. It was a shocking surprise. Every Who down in Whoville, the tall and the small, was singing, without any presents at all. He hadn't stopped Christmas from coming. It came somehow or another. It came just the same. And the Grinch with the Grinch feet, ice cold in the snow, stood puzzling and puzzling, how could it be so? It came without ribbons, it came without tags, it came without packages, boxes, or bags. And he puzzled 3 hours till his puzzler was sore. Then the Grinch thought of something he hadn't before. Maybe Christmas, he thought, doesn't come from a store. Maybe Christmas, perhaps, means a little bit more. And what happened then, well, in Whoville they say that the Grinch's small heart grew 3 sizes that day. And the minute his heart didn't feel quite so tight, he wheezed with the load through the bright morning light. And he brought back all the toys and the food for the feast, and he himself, the Grinch, carved the roast beef. The end.